Hello, everyone, and welcome to YouTube Masterclass. This is a Coursera course. I'm a Coursera professor. I'm a professor in general. Coursera professor leads us to the three schools that are commonly associated with these classes: USC, Calarts, and Harvard. And Harvard has many art programs and many good schools to it and outlets, and that they're still working on putting together a film unit that I'm only responsible for teaching to film class to them as an elective. I think that's going to have to be worked out with your counselor in college if you're taking these courses for college. All of them can be taken for course credit through Coursera. You have to apply to through Coursera, and then if you get it, then you can take the class. And what you have to do to take the class is see all the videos all the way through, because there's usually like 16 hours, each semester, and in summer school there were 12 hours instead of 16, and it's all individual classes that are like an hour long that I teach. I'm Professor Dr. Sheley, and we're taking a class on auteur cinema. It's from Quentin Tarantino. What the auteur, you may not recognize that word. It's a French word. It means author. But hang on, there was this writing. It was Francois Truffaut's Politique d'Auteur. And the Politique d'Auteur explains how he loves how craftsmen make movies, like Bazin loves craftsmen, Bazin, the great critic that wrote What is Cinema? And that Bazin was saying that he liked craftsmen better. Truffaut said that he liked auteurs better, and he made up this word. He used this word, the author of the whole film. Now, we know in Hollywood, most of the time, the director really is the auteur, like in some countries like India and whatever else, where there's star directors. And that we have star directors in the United States is because, we praise them for their eccentricities always. As menial as a critic we are, we always praise our celebrities as critics. And that a director has to be a director of all trades, has to be in charge of every department, is interesting because the producer's kind of above him in the Hollywood system as the one that's going to see it through, make sure the movie gets made, etc. But the director is the author because the camera is like a pen. When you move the camera around, it's writing in light, you're writing these colors. It's painterly too. It's not just writing, because film is a text when you boil down the deconstruction of it and write it down. It's like a screenplay. But the screenplay itself goes to be what the film is, and that comes from this text. So really, all sites on a film are related to a text. But there's also this painterly feeling I get, and it's from directors like Tarantino, and that's the sense that we're seeing it as we would want to see it as it's happening, as though it's what we intended the film to do. And I'm going to explain that a little bit with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is the ninth film by Tarantino. By the way, it's the ninth film we've been talking about Tarantino all class long, and a lot of people are going, well, is this one that is going to matter in terms of the politics of film? Not really. But this is one that matters in terms of the artists who catch notice of the author, who is the one that produces the most meaning in the film to be taken from the film, if there is intended meaning. And this making meaning thing. And then if you intend meaning, then you must have put an image of something in, because every image has a denotation, which is like the definition, and a connotation, which is like how it relates in the bigger picture of psychology and politics. And this movie is a lot like Inglourious Basterds, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't think there's any African Americans in this whole film, and I'm only pointing that out because Tarantino seems to always have the blaxploitation character in there in his film, where it's like a blaxploitation character will come out of the woodwork from one of those movies back in the 70s, and it's like, they would have a big role in the film. I think this one's intentionally an all-white cast because it's like, were purposely saying that blaxploitation was a whole different segregated thing in that way. And it's kind of relating modern day Hollywood to the 60s or the 50s. And then it takes place in the 60s. It's kind of hard to remember because it seems so up to date, and that Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio are in it again. And remember, we saw DiCaprio in Django Unchained as the Southern captain that was throwing things at people, that was screaming the N-word, that he was, he makes us laugh in that one, because even though he's this diabolical villain, he's so super, like, taut, intense, and bent all against anything that's African American. I mean, he's so reviled by anything African American that you wonder how, they surprise us with him getting killed. You're amazed how Django escapes. But Leonardo DiCaprio has another function in this film. He's actually our hero in this, and that he's like this Gatsby character, and that it's got a lot of pastiche from his career, as well as pastiche from Roman Polanski, that the story is about, you guessed it, Helter Skelter, Manson, and Kenneth Anger and all that. This for Rising. Only it's retold in a way that, like, wants you to accept it as truth, whether the filmmakers wanted you to accept it as truth or not. They probably didn't care either way. Because, like, how's it going to affect them? How you really think history happened? But like in Glorious Bastards, there were a lot of elements from this film that were absolutely real. I mean, there were things like the fact that Brad Pitt is a stuntman for the superstar DiCaprio, and Margot Robbie plays Sharon Tate. And Sharon Tate's the one who gets killed by the Mansons up at their place at Beverly Hills. And the movie has all that. I mean, it doesn't really have the whole thing where Kenneth Anger took his crew out and made Lucifer Rising and then killed one of the Manson dudes in the middle of that movie, at the end of that movie, and we're all supposed to go, like, cheering that they knew he was even him, and that, like, Rosemary's Baby was such a debacle. And it was a great movie, but, like, it was a debacle behind the scenes. Like, one of the producers had died, and there was a lot of things, people cheating on their wives or whatever. So and then, like, Anton LaVey's in, like, this satanic scene, and then, like, it gets even crazier because in Rosemary's Baby, there's all these bad things that happen, and then right at that time, they were finishing the film, and right at that time, the Mansons attacked Sharon Tate. So then there's this whole thing about how the Mansons were listening to the Beatles. And the Mansons were listening to the Beatles, and they were, like, told by the Beatles that there needed to be a race war. And so they go to Beverly Hills and try to make it look like African Americans do it. And the movie cuts all that reality out. That's the real thing that happened. And they killed Sharon Tate. Roman Polanski found out about it. He got really mad, made Macbeth, and then we all went off to chant in the woods as, like, pixies and fairies and stuff, No, I'm just saying, like, the history of it all gets very concretely distorted when a lot of people don't see what's really going on. And so there's elements of the truth in this. One of the things I took out of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is that if Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio were living in Beverly Hills and they were next door to Sharon Tate, I did not think the Mansons would have killed her. Like, that's one thing we love about this, is it's like revenge on all the things that destroyed the Summer of Love. The Summer of Love being 69, that the Manson murders happened right at the end of 69, beginning of 70, and that was the end of the Summer of Love. Now, this one's interesting because instead of being paranoid or anything about the Mansons coming or people sneaking in, they leave that a total, like, secret throughout the film. But there's a scene where Brad Pitt goes to where the Mansons are hiding, and, like, there's all these people, and it almost reminds you of that, like, camp of, like, people that want to be in movies but don't anymore, and they have, like, this cult, and they're at a ranch. And I swear, anytime there's a lot of people at a ranch, I gotta consider it a cult. What are they doing there, And it's like, no, I don't know for sure. That was kind of a joke. But the thing is like, if you take Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a lot of smooth car rides in it with Brad Pitt, and that you're following both him and DiCaprio and Margot Robbie around in this really good, really long movie. And one of the things I haven't discussed about Tarantino is how he has these movies in length. Like, these movies are not just delivered like within an hour. Like, most of his movies are over 2.5 hours. I mean, it's weird. That's probably why he makes so few of them, because he wants to make the 3 hour ones like perfect and without, any sort of blemish. And so you get this ideal scene where Margot Robbie's like watching herself act in the movie, and she's in this movie, and she's Sharon Tate in that scene. So she's watching one of like those Deceivers type Matt Helm movies, and she's laughing, and she's seeing the audience laugh, and it's really hard to judge when you're making movies. It's really hard to judge how it looks to other people. And then it's really hard to judge that even when they tell you they liked it and everything. They're like, well, you want to know what about it they liked? And they're like, well, the whole thing was good. And so, but like, I'm sitting there, like, watching this film unfold, and it's like Tarantino for the first time again. Because all the punches are pulled, everything's go for broke. Everything's cinema for the sake of cinema. We got all our sets back after people complaining years that we're using all the sets. We got our sets back. We're doing these big boom mic shots, and the driving shots, like I said, are beautiful. One thing I got to mention about Brad Pitt in this, and I think he won an Academy Award for this. Yeah, he did. And once upon a time in Hollywood, when he goes to the ranch, and other times that he's fighting, like, say, Bruce Lee, he ends up fighting Bruce Lee in it and kicks his ass. Of course he's going to kick Manson's ass at the end of the movie. He kicked Bruce Lee's ass. And it wasn't even because Bruce Lee was ethically wrong like the Mansons. It was because he told him to pick a fight with him. Like in Raging Bull, where, freaking Robert De Niro is like, hit me, and then Joe Pesci's like, oh, I don't want to hit you, I'm not going to hit you, and then he's like, hit me, man. So finally he drives him crazy enough to hit him. Like, boom, he hits him one, and his, now hit me again. It's like Brad Pitt is going to dominate this movie with his muscle, and like, that's how it ends. So it's the most extinguishing point is that, like, DiCaprio and Brad Pitt take care of business, otherwise would have been slain by the Mansons. And so it's a great ending because it's one of those, like, and the fact that he finds these antagonists like Hitler and the Mansons in these movies of revisionism isn't just because we would have kicked their ass today. It's also to repair the hole in our psyche that the Summer of Love ending has left for us all, in the form of what is really not that horrible, but it's a horrible, horrible thing when you hear about how Sharon Tate died. But, you got to think they're sending people to Vietnam at the same time. Vietnam's a lot deadlier than getting killed by a serial killer. Also, you've got the whole idea of, like, having to kill for war. And this is like the Hollywood remedy, is like the entertainment sleeve, is like Leonardo DiCaprio aspiring to become this better actor in this, like, not he's a great actor in the movie, but he's plays an actor in the movie, so he's aspiring in the movie to become a great actor. And it's interesting because it has the whole thing, where that line of reasoning where he says he's a has-been, even though he just finished a series that's going to be on TV forever. So if you're on TV at the time, you may not even know it, but like that you think you're a has-been after your work is done. Dude, I can relate to that, man. It's like, it's like here today, gone tomorrow, And the sets kind of disappear and come back in this, like, here today, gone tomorrow. It's like this fade, that there are narrators in this. I know Inglourious Basterds has Samuel L. Jackson in some of the narration, strangely enough. I think this one does too. I'm pretty sure there's some. That I don't know for sure, because I think that there aren't really any influences from African Americans in this one. And that's totally him making the stance, like a pro-African American statement, that they're always left out of the golden years, And this is a really interesting film because it has that scene with Great Escape, and it looks, I don't think that's artificial intelligence, but they've been doing that for a while, like taking characters and putting them in other movies, like they did with Forrest Gump. And and that's so it blends in with like this thing with Brad Pitt where he's like fighting with Bruce Lee, that he like kicks his ass, and then at the end of the movie, when you get your ultimate ride, you're thinking it's going to go like the story I was telling earlier. And then Leonardo DiCaprio, he's got this flamethrower that earlier in the film is like, "Die, you Nazi bastards, die!" And he's like spraying them with spray fire, and yeah, that was a crazy movie. And then he was doing that as though he was making that movie while our movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's going on. So it's a movie about movies. And movie about movies are always self-reflexive. They're always the ones that key in on the idea that you have to enhance the medium to draw attention to it so that you can uh, draw attention to it so you can show them the process that you went through making the movie, or your processes may be similar as to how you make a movie, but that it's so you can learn how to make a movie really is the secret, because why else would they show how they made the movie in the movie? And they're drawing attention to that on purpose by making this all a Hollywood film, that it's a once upon a timer. There's Once Upon a Time in America, Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in China, 1, 2, and 3, There's Once Upon a Time in Mexico by Robert Rodriguez, and that's similar to the Tarantino feel in this. Robert Rodriguez's Once Upon a Time in Mexico was more like a mariachi type movie, and it was actually in that series with Desperado. And they made those films like rapid fire, not back to back, and they all got released later because there's a slow release. Don't tell your friends this, but sometimes there's a slow release where they can't get a movie out in time to, show the fans that are expecting it right then, when they hear it's done. And then they don't see it for like 5 years unless they're in one of those movie towns like LA or New York, and that's about it, where you can see all the movies before they're finished and the different versions. And the different versions will blow your mind of these movies, but, we've gone over that. And I've seen this Blu-ray has a few more scenes in it than the feature film did in the theater. And it's one of the movies I saw last in the theater. One thing that it came out in 2019. And in 2019, the film business was kind of closing down. I mean, everyone had COVID. Everybody was falling apart. Everybody was losing money. People had to deal with, and Hollywood had some problems then. I think most of them were resolved in a weird way, because now they're just going to go forward with making movies all they can, even though there's a really slow turnaround, and the writer's strike and everything set everybody back. And then, and the COVID thing where everybody got like put in containment, or everybody got put in quarantine. And anyway, the point is that 2019 was really the beginning of all that. And that these movies were really great, and that like people that were working in the business, and like I was making a show myself, and we all kind of looked at it like it's the last great movie. I mean, like Ready Player One is a really great movie too, but there's another one, I can't think of it right now, but there's Meet the Fablemans that came out by Steven Spielberg. Was it last year or the year before? So there really have been a few movies that have come out, even in the overtake of AI. And the overtake of AI happened basically because of COVID lynching everyone from the internet. Even they couldn't even go online. It was getting really confusing. And as we all know, this movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was the one on display for us all to see what we love most about Hollywood and just enjoy it, because I think the directors knew that that everybody'd be taking a hiatus for a few years, and it's come back a little bit, the cinema. They're making more movies where it actually has a director again, and there aren't many directors that work on an AI film. Actually, usually a computer scientist programs the coordinates, and I don't know exactly why I'd want to copy anything from them to put in my film. I'd rather make if I needed stock footage, AI would be the place to go. But if I don't need stock footage of anything that's come already, then I'm going to film the footage myself, you know? And I think what's cool about these kind of movies as opposed to like the little guy over here like me is these movies are like huge. They're so huge that like they buy the set. They buy the set at Warner Brothers or whatever. And then they get the production design on it to make it look like this beautiful painting. And that's where I get this idea of painterly. And they bring in with the costumes and everything, they bring in the medium. And this is like the medium of Roman Polanski being pastiched and homage too. So, oh, and then of course at the ending with the Mansons, I forgot to say that DiCaprio flame throws, Squeaky from, like blows her up, dude, in his hot tub. And it's not that it's funny that they're killing the Mansons in these crazy ways, but like Brad Pitt slams her on this table, and the Manson guy and the Manson girl are talking earlier in that scene about how they're causing a revolution and they're bringing the world to an end and they're going in and they're going to right what's wrong. That takes you back to when they saw that when Brad Pitt had seen them at the ranch and thrown that guy into that side of that car. And that's where Brad Pitt sees Bruce Dern in the movie. And that Bruce Dern tells him that he wants him to leave and like not come back and that he's pissed off at him and to get out of there. Is an amazing scene in Hollywood history. It's just one of those things that's like, it's almost like how some of the cast must have felt that had fallen to the level of hanging out with a serial killer cult and really having nowhere else to go, And then it's like, that's what's botched about that whole story is that these guys were so lowbrow that did the Sharon Tate killing that you're always like, oh, that's unfortunate because, usually we're safe from that sort of thing. And if they had been there, if DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, who are like they see each other a lot in the movie as he's his stunt double, but he's actually kind of a friend, but kind of when they're talking about like the different things that they do. And then Brad Pitt has one of those long car ride sequences to behind the theater. And there's like this big theater that's like a drive-in. Drive-ins are where cars come in and they park and they watch movies. You knew that. Like in Last Picture Show or Midnight Cowboy at the beginning, it's got that drive-in that's all abandoned. I can't believe they had abandoned drive-ins already in the 60s, man. And there's that Midnight Cowboy vibe to this movie, and some of their outfits are looking like that. What I get most out of a movie about a movie is that, like, you still get this idea that you're covering every pitch of the action genre, of the action adventure genre, although it's kind of condensed into this neo-noir gangster for Tarantino, and that like you get this neo-noir feeling from this sort of Chinatown-esque Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as it unfolds. And you kind of see how it's all going, and you're thinking like Inglourious Basterds is going to end like it does in history, and it's all headed to that point, because usually when movies are based on reality, they end the same way they did, at least that they were recorded in history. But this one claims a different ending at the last 20 minutes is different than what happened in reality. It kind of questions, and that's when you start looking at the film saying, what's real, what's reality ends. And I think when you get to what's real, it's like what you actually see, what you're actually seeing, but what isn't real is that reality for anyone else. I mean, the Beverly Hills mansions we've all come to kind of visualize. It's like this movie star glamour is only accepted to movie stars, and I think that's the point the film makes. Because, and that's one of the reasons the Mansons get turntabled upside down and killed, is because they're not cool enough to even be in the club. I mean, they're so back there talking about revolution and killing at random, and although if they kill someone white, then they'll make it look like someone black. I mean, a little bit of that gets in there, but it really doesn't. There's really no talk about African Americans. The whole thing has been shaken out or pressed clean, or like it looks like everything that you would disturb you. Like there's no, is gone, and that it's kind of this conflict-free, you know, Barbie world kind of thing. But then you get this real concentration that something real dastardly and evil's going to happen at the end, and it's going to shake to the core where everything goes wrong. And this time it doesn't go wrong. Like, well, it does, because it's so horrendous to see the Mansons blown up, you know, and killed by Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio just for coming in their house. The whole thing winds up, they go in the wrong house. And there's like this cigarette that's like contaminated in that. And then there's this thing with, that Brad Pitt has, and he walks his dog, and he's like, doo-doo. And then he sees them come the other way, so he gets back to the house in time to kick their asses just for threatening Leonardo DiCaprio. And he's, you know, he's an actor in anguish in the movie. Like, he's always wondering if he's going to get another part, and that's very much like Leonardo DiCaprio. He's always getting lots of roles and lots of roles given to him, but that's what an actor wants, is a lot of roles. I mean, they still want that, and they're going after that. And they're thinking, we want the roles we can get, and especially we love Hollywood roles, so we're going to take all these Hollywood roles. And he knows he's going to get them probably, but he's still in anguish, because when something ends as a project, and this show he's doing is coming to an end, you really get this feeling, this sinking feeling, this part of you is going away. And he says that in the film, and it's kind of serious but kind of a joke, but I take it serious, because like, when you finish a book, music, or a movie, and you're done with it, there's this kind of disconnection that happens to it. Like, everybody's going to read it now or whatever, but you're just like, it's a book on its own now. I can't really touch it. It feels disconnected from me. It's done, and I'm relieved. But the rest of the world's going to see this in a different way than I've actually construed it. And so it's just like, I let it go. And part of you just, it's like, I wish I could explain what I did to make it different, but, you know, or what I did in the whole process of it, but it doesn't work that way. You have to work hard on everything and just keep it up on like the release dates. And, you know, Tarantino's one of those directors like Stanley Kubrick or Robert Bresson, who was like, had like 13 films, you know, and Tarantino's only had 9, but Kill Bill kind of makes 10 because there's 2 of those, but I won't count it any differently than Tarantino can say. I just think that in this class we've learned so much about style and art that it'd be interesting to like say that we suddenly compare directors to get the comparative lit sort of the thing for Harvard. Well, Terry Gilliam and Oliver Stone are kind of existing in this same period of Tarantino, although they had been around before. That Oliver Stone goes back to Platoon, and Terry Gilliam is before Time Bandits as Jabberwocky. And that Terry Gilliam just finished that movie, The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, and I have a copy of it if anybody wants to come by and watch it sometime, but it's here on my computer, and like, I'm like, Terry Gilliam's kind of the renaissance of fantasy for the whole cinema league. He came back with Brazil and Baron Munchausen and Time Bandits in Brazil and 12 Monkeys, and you know, that he had a great career as a sci-fi artist. He has action and really dark subject matter, like, and they're both kind of neo-noir in a strange way, although Terry Gilliam is much more like he doesn't do noir as much as he does sci-fi, and his worlds look sci-fi even if they're not. Like in Brazil, it looked sci-fi, and it kind of was. And you kind of rate Brazil as a sci-fi film, but that they don't fit any genre reminds me of Tarantino and how the way Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a movie on a movie, which is not even a real genre, but there's so many movies that filmmakers make movies about the movie. And when you make a movie about the movie again, you're trying to instruct the filmmakers and the audience how to do this scene. It's one of those things that goes back to D.W. Griffith, where you reel it through and you're showing them the same thing a couple of times so they know how to recreate it if they ever had to. I don't know. It's like, well, recreate it for one thing, but At least we got our coverage, And so the ultimate point that I'm getting at with Terry Gilliam is that he's this fantasy. He makes fantasies. He brought back the fantasy genre, and then you had sort of George Lucas with the prequels after that, and then it was sort of like this cemented genre. Sci-fi kind of canonized itself, and in 2019 there was Star Wars 9, and Star Wars 9 came out at the same time than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and they both did well at the theater. They were both big box office hits, and there was all kinds of information thrown out about Star Wars at the time, and all of us had to work on our own Star Wars projects, right? Everybody was sent out to do their own little Star Wars project, or big, I should say, because these are big projects, and you're like, that, it's weird that 2019, the last year of movies or whatever, went down with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and went down with Star Wars 9, because you kind of get this feeling that that's the end of oblivion for movies, that we've cleaned out the whole deck, and we're ready to turn in. And that's something about movies that they always give signs of, is when it's ending. And you kind of get this sense from the Last Picture Show that whole process, that neoclassical movie, black and white, Peter Bogdanovich, it's like the movie shows you the end of cinema, and you're thinking, well, then it must be over. But then you get whatever else many films piling in, like Nashville comes in by Robert Altman. And a movie like Nashville is so documentary real that you get this like real sense that you're back in reality, whereas you're not really, because there's still these actors that are putting on a role, and they're still making a movie where they're talking about their personification as an actor objective versus their persona, which is like their psychological expression as an actor in the movie. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's kind of similar in that, because although they're more like Tarantino characters, which we know he turns it up, he makes them look like. And speaking of Star Wars, this is the interesting thing about Tarantino. He actually does so much production design that there's always some kind of costume. Like in Pulp Fiction, there were costumes that were made just for the movies. And then it's really cool that he can get in like thinking that he's independent because he has so much power, that he can maneuver the production design, and especially the sets and the costumes, that he can maneuver the production design so high and still be totally in control. Because usually when you're heightening up the production design, you lose a lot of control of the film, because you're actually like buying things for like the cost of someone else directing one of your scenes from your movies. But I'm pretty sure Quentin Tarantino is the director of all the scenes of his movies. Why should I deny it? And to consider him an auteur is like, because we see these matching images in all the films, and we see these matching motifs, kind of like disenfranchisement, or that also means reversible fortune, but the bad side of it, where your ship sinks because of something that happens in the movie, or the character in the movie's ship sink, and it could be like for whatever reason, but it's like watching this tragic hero go down in flames. But what's weird is sometimes that's not as accentuated. Like when John Travolta gets killed in Pulp Fiction, it happens at such a surprise that they're surprised. It's just like when John Travolta kills that guy and shoots him in the head, because it happens so quick. Only theirs was funny, and ours in the movie, our jaws drop. We're like, then how's he alive later in this movie? Because you'd already seen like trailers knowing that he was going to be in later in the movie, even though it was a surprise that he died at all, because we're thinking he doesn't die. We've seen him at the end of the movie. But then to think that the Bruce Willis thing comes after the thing rearranges the whole movie again. And it makes sense. I've done it. I've put it together. It doesn't seem like it works right when you put it together. It doesn't seem like what you thought. But you're like, okay, this is the linearity. But who's ever done a linearity tracked on Orson Welles? Like, if you could visit him as a luminary sometime and knew that Citizen Kane was all ups and downs, how are you going to put Citizen Kane back in order? What are you going to do? Like, start with the scene where he's got the sled? Maybe that's why that's so accentuated. It's like, start here for real movie in linear time. And linear time had kind of broken up as a result of no closure or consequence films. And no consequence films like a Bonnie and Clyde type thing, where you're just taking the morals with you and just plaguing them with like mental images of beautiful goddesses of scenery and beautiful things of this world. And there's scenes in Bonnie and Clyde where which are edited out of the DVD I have where they're like writing poetry in the forest, you know. I mean, I'm just saying, like, there are some interesting deleted scenes. And then there's some, like, adjustments to film that have been made that were suggested by the director, but, like, it's after the fact. He's gone. The director's gone, so they still do that with TCM. And I don't find that very controversial because usually, in most sense, they're preserving the original vision of pretty much the director. Is who the vision of the director is who Turner Classic Movies will celebrate. And that gets us back to that star power director type thing, like Woody Allen or whatever. That's a caricature of himself. He's movie for the sake of movie. Everybody loves his timing. His timing is so perfect. His timing is dead on that we all think about Woody Allen and we're all like, okay, this is a character we can see repeatedly because he's so complicated with his psychology, but he's so hilarious with his observations, right? And we all know Quentin Tarantino is kind of one of those personalities too. He's like, well, I can do a personality thing too. And like I saw him in the news recently saying that 2019 really was the last year of cinema. I mean, everybody's got their own idea about like whether cinema is over or whether it's ending or going to end or whatever. You know, and then you think of that Terry Gilliam Renaissance of fantasy, and you're like, or the Oliver Stone war films, and you're thinking, well, in Terry Gilliam, the end of the world has already come, but we'll make the best of it, and we'll go to Fantasyland if we have to. Tarantino's like, make the things that happen seem like a fantasy, but that they're all very real to the state of the movie is complicated to explain. You have the layer of comic book and the layer of documentary realism. Now, you look at a movie like Sin City, and you can kind of see how a comic can be for adults. Okay, great. But, like, if you had to take a comic and, like, storyboard and send it to this movie, it's because the production design and the exaggerated costumes are all drawing attention to themselves. And again, these are attention grabbers. Like, check this out. This can be used in a movie effectively. This is what we're trying to demonstrate to you, is this kind of a scene can be used effectively in a movie. And by effectively, I mean like an entertaining thought for the audience that's going to draw them in, because in these days they were all about box office drive and bringing in the numbers and having all these people go to the theater, and all these guys going to the theater seeing like the last movies of all time, and then suddenly movies come back again, and you're like, well, movies just made a comeback again, and there they go again. And so this is that like reality that Leonardo DiCaprio's in the movie. It's like he's sitting there and he's like, I'm a has-been. You know, it's funny in a way, but it's also sad because actors never realize their own talent, and I'm sure Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt can agree, and Margot Robbie can agree. They never realize their own talents, and they don't get enough compliments. Like, usually it's just fans like cheering at them and stuff, but compliment your favorite actors, dude. It doesn't hurt, because the thing is like actors are actually a lot more valuable than anyone can pay in Hollywood. Not that that's one of the issues they're having with film, but there's some directors, even Tarantino again is like too valuable of a director, being a star-powered director. And Terry Gilliam's kind of star-powered, but he's kind of more of a hermit. He kind of lives alone and kind of, but he comes out with these outrageous cartoons, and he was doing it clear since Monty Python. It was totally amazing because he was the American Monty Python guy that just got into it because he was drawing a cartoon, and they'd make up all these excuses at Monty Python to like get Terry Gilliam to be a director again after Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which he also co-directed. And so you see these big Movies like Monty Python on the Holy Grail, all the way to 12 Monkeys and Zero Theorem and Fisher King and all that. So he's got these movies that are like intensely real, but they travel to this sort of metaphysical fantasy land, and or transcendent fantasy land, you know. And with Tarantino, you always stay in the world. You don't go through a portal or anything into another world. You always stay in the world. But that your time is limited in the Tarantino film also gets sort of shown off in that these characters are all interacting in this sort of array of production design and well done costume. Reminds me of Scorsese and his attention for detail on these. And if you look at the costume design of like Gangs of New York by Martin Scorsese, which has Leonardo DiCaprio, it's again one of those ways that Tarantino and Scorsese are similar, that they go all out on costumes. I mean, that they go all out on costumes is so noticeable at this point that we're all just like, that's what a good filmmaker would do, you know. Totally clear the production design, and the result is sort of these montage mise-en-scene things, where it's these long takes sometimes, or short takes, or just like a movie where it's flickering around. But some of the TV things they discuss are different. Some of the things with Margot Robbie seeing herself in the movie and then her not getting killed at the end in this sort of cul-de-sac tenant Polanski sort of paradigm. She walks away, and Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio are going to stay friends. He's going to come help him do another movie as soon as he's done with the hospital, because they had to be taken to the hospital after having been broken in on by the Mansons, although they kicked their ass. And I think everyone cheers at a point like that, because half of them are cheering because they know revision history is what they want in this case, but half of them are cheering because that's the exact way Tarantino would have had it. They're cheering for the movie, first of all. But they're also cheering the Mansons got killed, because it's like when Hitler gets killed, everybody cheers, you know. Nowadays, they'll do more research and see that, like, even he wasn't even as reviling as they settled out in history for him to be. And I know he's reviling in every way in, like, one of these contexts of movie making, but, you know, I've met more reviling people than I'm not saying anybody in the film industry. The film industry is great. I mean, the film industry today is beautiful. If it could just rehitch itself into cranking out some good, masterful imageries, you know. And I don't know whatever is all going on with Hollywood, why it is kind of in this stagnant phase of releasing slow. But I was told they'll release 70 films by like next year. I don't know. I think that's probably true. It's not as much as they used to, but it's really a start, and it's really a good thing, because those hanging on to their own begotten box office would like rather see Tarantino's 10th film now that like it's getting edgy as to whether he said that 2019 was the end of cinema, you know. So now we're back around to that quote. I'm like, well, if he thinks that it's the end of cinema, because then he's probably got more movies to show, you know, because, I mean, not that he's being contradictory, but he's probably saying, well, like, this is the end of cinema, how are we going to show our movies, you know? So everybody's focused on the wrong thing. They're focused on him getting his last one out. Well, that's good. Maybe in the process we could pick up and dust off the old film industry and get it going again. I've tried everything, you know. It's like, as a filmmaker, you try everything, and really I think the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood gets it perfectly. Like, it has everything explained down to the detail about like what's going to happen, and you think it's going to go one way because it's following the story of history so closely. But then when it veers off and crashes off to the side of the road, and he's like throwing people into their car, by the ending, it's a shock ending. Yeah, the edits are shot cut. You know, you're moving around while you edit. Then she's a Ford Fairlane kind of thing, you know. Coppola shoots like overhead, you know. And you have those overhead drags throughout the movie. And there's ways of directing a film, and there's ways of showing people how to ride the dolly. You know, you can ride the dolly and get a good shot. as a director, you should be making the whole movie. And here we get to the aspect of Tarantino already with Reservoir Dogs being able to in some way meet the standard that he was going to set up for the film. It's just that his register wasn't really fantasy like that had been so popular with Terry Gilliam. Oliver Stone, hardcore reality, everything's political, everything's political. And I remember that Tarantino has had a few scenes in his movies that even veered towards politics, the most political being the weed scene in Jackie Brown, whether they should let people smoke weed in a movie. And I don't know if that was real weed or not, probably not, but if you can smoke weed in a movie now, and there's still a controversy with the FCC about using that. So you have to be kind of careful what you do in a movie. The censorship doesn't really exist, but it kind of does. It depends on if you're making a PG-13 or a R-rated movie, and that's taken into consideration. And really, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has some pretty shocking parts, but overall, it's not like as much as the hits just keep on coming like Pulp Fiction. It just keeps going and blows your mind. This one all kind of tracks out to one event and then climaxes, and you're just left buzzing, with catharsis. You're like, that was the ultimate ending. That ending blew my mind, So, it's that feeling you get when you're making a movie and you kind of got this sense that you're like the other directors in Hollywood, which have something new to bring to it, that he's different than Oliver Stone in some way, because Oliver Stone wrote Conan the Barbarian, I understand, and Tarantino loves Oliver Stone, but that Oliver Stone shows montage. Tarantino's kind of claimed on the montage that Oliver Stone has done voiceovers. Quentin Tarantino kind of follows the voiceovers. And Terry Gilliam doesn't really do voiceovers as much. I mean, everything's looped, but I mean, like, overall the frame search, it's not for a narrated film, usually not. I'm not saying that's bad or good. I'm saying that some people prefer it with or without. I think it's an accoutrement of a film that if you have, great, take advantage of it, make it self-reflexive, whatever. Self-reflexivity is kind of an artist thing to do. Like, we're showing you that we're artisans and we're creating the film to be these artistic artworks, And we'll get more into next week with this movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. More of Terry Gilliam, more of Oliver Stone comparison. That the Oliver Stone comparison is not so much political or ideal, it's more stylistically with montages and how Tarantino edits, and that everyone knows you learn from Oliver Stone editing, but how they're different is Oliver Stone is egregiously political in his films, and Quentin Tarantino vies not really a political side, although his films are anarchic, like Godard, which kind of puts him in that symbolic state of, left-wing criticism, where we're here to make things equal for women, like Kill Bill, and that we're also into equality of African Americans, which is a surprise to come out of his career, but yeah, by not including them in a movie, we're drawing attention to the fact that they're not usually included in movies, And it does this great sort of film geek sense that, Tarantino back when he's in his days at the video store, and just loving everything he can get his eye on. And I think that really trained him to how to put an eye on a movie. Like, whether he's using sensors or degraded angles or lighting structures, we can't take our eyes off the movie. It's like, it's going. And I think this one's a masterpiece. I think they all pretty much have masterpiece extent. But this one and Pulp Fiction, to me, are the highlights of a great career that we've come to talk about this semester. And we have 2 classes left. And it's the Quentin Tarantino as auteur. I hope you understand auteur is author, the one that puts the most of the writing into the film, the one that's directing it, puts the most of the camera writing, which is painterly, into the film. Therefore, they're an author leading you camera shot to camera shot, how they've edited it later, camera shot to the final showdown. And the final showdown or the final threshold or whatever is so ridiculously subverted at the end of this one. You'll be like, did it really end? Did I want it to end? Did that just come on and did it end? And you're kind of like, that was great, but I know it's 3 hours, but hang on, what did I miss? And you get that way because you're thinking that suddenly you've just been totally thrown awkward in the realms of history, and that's one of Tarantino's great gifts, is throwing people in the awkward realms of strange history, which is kind of like Oliver Stone taking us to the Platoon story and us going through Platoon, which is a lot like Saving Private Ryan when you think about it. Platoon is. But they're in different wars. The Private Ryan is World War II, and that, yeah, the Platoon is Vietnam. Well, I think I'll leave you with that surprise ending, and I hope you join me next time so we can discuss Tarantino and other directors, and we can start to look at what we're shaping as the auteur theory. In the next 2 classes, we're going to have a good... And then, of course, in 2 classes, it's the last class, so that means finals. That, remember, we skipped the midterm, so we're fine. But finals are coming in a couple of weeks, sort of, and then you have like a couple of weeks to finish them. So don't get nervous about it, because even if you take this course later, you can still do the final as you reach the last number. Coursera's kind of designed it like that. So I appreciate you all, and thank you for watching today, and we'll talk later more about Auteur, Quentin Tarantino, and other classes that are coming up in the summer and next semester and everything, okay? All right, everybody, we'll talk to you later. Bye.